तत्परम्पर्याय विद्महे ज्ञानलिङ्गेश्वराय धीमहि तन्नो गुरुः प्रचोदयात्
Namaskaram, everyone. Welcome to Songs of the Heart series, heart-to-heart conversations with the mentors and teachers of the Gitananda family worldwide. We are delighted today to have with us Yogacharini Niraimathi. Namaste, Niraimathi.
Namaste, Sangeeta.
So good to have you here. Such a blessing, such an honor to have Niraimathi here. As per habit and tradition, I am going to share with you some of the highlights of our Niraimathi's bio data, which I will then share fully in the description of this video. So exciting to be sharing all of the life journeys of these amazing human beings, as each one of them is so different. All of you are so different and bring so much richness to the parampara. So, Niraimathi, you describe yourself as a metaphysician, and you have been studying mysticism in various forms for most of your life. And you teach classes, you have one-on-one sessions, and we will talk about the upcoming book that you are publishing. But yoga was has been a guiding force in your life, truly a way of life, since you were very, very young. So we're gonna maybe mention that and speak about that. You know, that you were able to embody yogasana naturally without a guidance from very early on, from when you were 6 years old. And then you were introduced to the system of Raj Yoga, and then eventually were blessed to learn about the Gitananda tradition and visited the ashram for the 6-month teacher training, have been going back and forth, brought your own students there, have been a mentor for several years. We're a mentor in the Yoga Step-by-Step course online with Dr. Ananda. So much is there. But let me allow you to talk about all this rather than reading more and more. So let's begin with your name, because when you and I were having a conversation about this call, and I asked you about the meaning of your name, you shared with me that your name means full moon. And you and I share a great passion for astrology. So I, of course, exploded into joy and mirth, learning more about your name. So please, would you tell us about your name, how you received it, your path with yoga, and then in a following question, I'll ask you more about mysticism. Thank you so much.
Yes, Sangeeta, thank you. Lots of kind of questions, and where do I start? So my name, Niraimathi, was given. This was before, I think, the Gitananda tradition, and I'll just actually clarify that I didn't stay for the whole 6 months, because at that time, so this was back in 1996, and at that time you could do the 3 months, and then it kind of almost broke down. You could do the 3 months and then add another 3 months, and I had a lot going on in my life. So I did 3 months and then went back into the world, and then later came back with some of my own students. But so in this time, it was a little bit more, or perhaps less formal, I think, from what I believe it is now. I think there's now more of an official naming ceremony. And at this time, we were in Arunachala at the temple, and we had to go in and we had to have not such Western names when we went into this inner sanctum. And when we were approaching the temple, there was only a really small group of us studying at the ashram at that time. And I was 26 years old, I think. I just turned 26. And I literally was running around everywhere. And Amaji was just walking and talking. And, you know, there were 2 or 3 others kind of walking alongside her. And I'd race up and I'd listen, and then I'd race over there, and then I'd race back. And I was just like this. I just had so much to look at and so much to see. And then when we got to the temple, she had to choose names for us all. And she said, and Nicole, I'm going to call you Niraimathi, because you have the energy of a full moon, which I think was a very polite way.
That's marvelous.
I think was a very polite way of saying that I couldn't stand still. And in years to come, I kind of would write to Amaji and say, I'm wondering if maybe you should change my name to the new moon now, because I don't have quite the same energy that I used to have. But yeah, so that was the naming, and that's where I think it came from.
Wow, what a wonderful image. Having been blessed to having been to Arunachala, I can just imagine. I just could picture it with, you know, our beloved Ammaji, very statuary and composed, and you running here and there, like we all did around her and do around her, really.
Yes.
So that's marvelous. Thank you so much. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about mysticism, because mysticism is such a profound experience. First of all, it's a profound experience that then we study with the aid of books and texts and practices. And so we don't talk often about mysticism in yoga, although obviously all of the aspects of pratyahara, all of them truly, right? All of them are mystical. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, no, they're all mystical. But in terms of mysticism and music, then, mysticism and sound, what is your experience with the practices of sound, whether are deep listening, you know, the shabda pratyahara, or mantra, invocation, evocation, that you have found to correspond to your passion for, you know, mysticism in other traditions? So the question is, to reframe it, you study mysticism in a variety of traditions. How would you share the mysticism of sound in the Gitananda tradition for someone who is not in the tradition? That's a tricky question.
Yeah, no, there are many parts to that, and I guess the first where I want to start is that sound was probably one of the focal points that led me into mysticism, because being very sensitive and being empathic, sound has a very immediate effect upon me. I feel sound. I experience the world in my body. And sound is particularly relevant to that. So I remember as a child, when my parents would turn the television on, there would be this high-pitched, and I just couldn't stand it. I'd have to leave the room. So sound was this kind of everyday reality that was really affecting me quite strongly. So I realized that I needed to be managing sound. I needed to not theoretically understand sound, but I needed to experientially understand sound. And when I reached my teenage years, as for many teenagers, I went through a bit of a turbulent time, but not in terms of a rebellion or anything like that. It was just that the world was a bit discordant for me, and I sought out places that offered peacefulness. And one of those places was a cemetery, and another place was an ashram that was close to where I lived, or where I went to school. And so both of those things had an absence of sound. And that was actually what was really important, was the absence of sound to be poking and prodding at me. And not only did the ashram have an absence of sound in some places, but it had particular sounds. It had chants and mantras, and it was something that I actually realized, oh, this is like a balm. This is soothing me. This helps. This is good. And then there was the incense and the flowers, and everything was a feast in a way that I hadn't known you could feast through the senses. I didn't know that you could feed on flowers and color and sound and smell when you mix them all together. So that was probably the starting point in recognizing that sound was fundamental to my experience and to my harmony, to the harmony of me living happily and easefully as a human in this body, in this life. So then when I came to yoga, as you mentioned earlier, in the younger years, it was just through this natural tendency toward advanced yogasana, headstands, Baddha Konasana, like, you know, really things that I probably don't really do anymore, can't do anymore. But nobody around me was doing them. I hadn't seen them, but they were just, that was how I wanted to use my body, it was in these ways. And I also remember having this little red tartan woolen blanket in the corner of my room. And I used to have to take my shoes off to go onto this tartan blanket, and I'd have some teddy bears lined up, but I couldn't take a pen or paper or a book. It was like, I don't take anything into the space. I just go in here and I just sit, and I'll sit with my teddy bears. And interestingly, I wrote a little sign that I called, strangely enough, I called it Ashanti. Shanti obviously meaning peace, but I had the A in the front, and that was outside. That was like on the desk leading in, there was this sign that said Ashanti. And I still remember writing it and coloring it in. And then I'd go into my little blanket tartan sanctuary space, and it was about doing nothing. So there was this kind of natural pull towards living a yoga life without knowing at all what a yoga life was at that point. So then again, in these turbulent teenage years, when I'm seeking out the cemetery and the ashram, which were kind of almost symbolic of what my life would become as an adult, I started seeing a psychologist, and he actually he was the one who introduced me to the ashram. And that was a turning point for me, where Raj Yoga then came in. So that was really about the meditative aspect and the concentration kind of techniques, and the higher mind kind of techniques. And that was also to combat migraines, because they were really quite disruptive in my early teenage years. So I was using these techniques. I was naturally pulled to this place. And it wasn't until my late teens that I was formally introduced to Hatha Yoga, and I started going to yoga classes. And then it was kind of like, oh, I know how to do this. This is really normal. So I think after doing half an hour class, I could go home and do a 2-hour practice, because it's just like, it just kind of pulled it all out of me. So then from there, it was almost like then I went into the physical practices, and it wasn't long after that. So I would have been about 23 when I came across the Gitananda tradition. So I hadn't been in yoga for a long time in terms of physical practices and formal study. But once I found the Gitananda tradition, I just stopped looking. I didn't need to go anywhere else. It was so full. It is still so full. I could do even just the step-by-step course 52 lifetimes, and I still wouldn't have it all done. So that was a really beautiful way for me to settle into that system and really go deep and walk well with it. I think it's the Gitananda tradition has this beautiful eloquence of teaching. It has this deep body of knowledge. And at the same time, and especially I think what Dr. Ananda Sir brings to it, is this unique flavor of, so how do you do this? How do you make yoga yours? And how does it live through you? And especially as mentor of this tradition, I've really, really appreciated that and really embraced that. So how does it live through you? How does it, so for you, Sangeeta, it's very much about the sound as well, and this quality of Nada yoga. For me, it's always lent into the Jnana yoga, the philosophy and the wellspring of ideas and connections and insights is what really yoga is for me at my depth. And even the asana has, it drops away a little bit for me. It's really the pranayama and the not even so much the concentration practices anymore. It's actually the space. It's almost the akash that leads me into the insight and the connection to what is and what's beyond. It's always the what's beyond. So yoga has been this beautiful, steadfast, grounding tool for me to reach out to these other kind of mystical experiences and traditions, but without becoming airy-fairy or uncentered, or, yoga's been the thing that kept me here in my body and doing a human as a humane being. yoga has been a very big part, and is still a very big part of that. And in my teachings, when I work with people in yoga, it's very much about the being rather than the doing. I mean, it's doing, but how do you do the doing to embrace the being and to express the being and to align the being and harmonize the being? It's not about achieving, it's about what do you need to balance what's happening today, and what do you need to extend where you're wanting to extend and open and experience and know and connect. It's a really beautiful tool for all of that. And the Gitananda tradition just brings that in a way that is so powerful and so knowledgeable that I haven't found that in any other form of yoga, which I haven't looked at for years, but the other yoga that I do seem to see is it's very stuck in the physical. It's very stuck in the doing and the achieving a form and a pose and a technique. And because the psychic sciences, the mystical sciences have always been so big in my life, the Gitananda tradition just enriched that, because it is taught as a psychic science. It is a metaphysical art. All of the practices are lighting up our, third eye is drawing us to that golden light, is bringing that golden cocoon around the koshas. It's all there. It just has different names.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much. Yes, it's true. It does have different names, but it is a connection on all of the levels, right? From the grossest, in terms of frequency, I mean, to the most refined. So tell us a little bit, if you like, about your book. You're publishing a book. Would you like to share with us about it? And are you employing, and bring back the theme over and over to sound, because I'm curious, of course. I want to learn from you and all. But so yeah, tell us a bit about the book, and also, are there some aspects of the book that specifically look at listening, or how we utter words, or how we think about sounds and things like that? Thank you.
Well, firstly, you use the word frequency, and that is really big for me, because when I break mysticism down, my experience, it is about frequency and vibration and ascension, connection, light, love, these very profound but experiences, not concepts. So frequency is the thing that underpins everything, and I'm in a constant process of harmonizing my frequency. That's all I'm doing. And trying to do it in a way that complements the human, and also doesn't get stuck in the human, that elevates the human and lifts the human, and also extends the human. Like, we come here to do this human thing, so let's do it well, let's do it brilliantly, but also let's have fun, let's be adventurous in our humanity as well. And I think we get a little bit stuck with that. So the book is really about and my work is really about extending people into their adventurousness, into their curiosity, because mysticism breeds curiosity. It enables us to go, oh, what's behind that? Or what's in that? Or what does that mean? Or where does that go? And how does that take me? And if we're doing that internally, which all of the yoga practices are, then I take myself inevitably into the wellspring of bliss and knowledge and higher connection and insight, and these things that lead me on this journey. And that journey is a mystical journey, which then inevitably brings us to the wonder and the magic that is inherent everywhere. I used to start off trying to find the magic out there, the magic in the invisible realms, which is where mysticism tends to sit comfortably, is in the invisible realms. And it was by doing that, by extending myself into the invisible realms, that I realized, hang on, this is magic. Like, this pen is magic. Like, just how, like, having a body, the fact that I can move something, the fact that I can do this, this is magic. So it's everywhere. It doesn't have to be other. It's here. But for a lot of us, we have to experience other to realize, to be able to look back and go, this is crazy. This creation is amazing. Like, what a privilege. So the book really is about using different topics to extend and stretch into the experience of wonder and magic, and recognizing limitations, because we are, you know, for instance, one chapter is on body, and we often experience the body in a particular way. We have certain ideas and judgments, and, you know, we live in a very limited kind of narrative. And so the work for me of mysticism, which definitely encompasses yoga, is about just expanding that narrative. Let's just stretch it and see what happens. What happens if you stop thinking it's like that? What happens if you stop believing it in that way? What happens if you look at it from over here? What happens if you look from up there? What happens if you stand on your head and look at it? It's just a different way of experiencing and perceiving things. And so in terms of sound, it's probably once again, it's the absence of sound. This seems to be the theme for me, in that one of the chapters is about silence, and it's about where silence leads us to. Because when I look at harmonizing, what I recognize is that we're often going to and fro in this duality. We're buffeted this way, we're that way, we're driven by this desire, we're avoiding that experience, where, you know, we're in this kind of back and forth of this and that, and yes and no, and up and down. And in the center of that lives this frequency, which I call the central frequency. And, you know, you could call it God, but this central frequency operates as a point of stillness. And so I can actually find it as a postural position in my body, which is yogasana. And in that postural position, this stillness takes me into this profound silence, which is full. But the silence is the absence of noise. And so this, to me, is the underpinning. This is like the psychic presence of Nada yoga. It's getting away from the noise, the whitewash of, you know, what's going on in our head, the chitter chatter, the doubt, all of that stuff that we've got going on, which literally is like a little carnival. It's like a little circus. Is a layer that we spend our life looking through, this little layer of circus. And that stillness, that silence is kind of coming up and going, So the sound, the frequency in the sound really is about shifting away from the noise and into the silence. And when we understand the silence, then we understand what noise is harmonious, what frequency, what vibration is soothing and flows and moves unencumbered, and it enriches my being and my experience, and which noise is pushing and pulling and prodding and poking and hurting. So that experience is obviously really different for each person. But for me, this to and fro, back and forth, and this central frequency, being here in the still point, is the difference between silence and noise.
Oh, thank you so much. This is a really beautiful, beautiful teaching. I really like it, enjoy it a lot, and it does make me aware of this, this alignment, this attunement, right? That we can search, and the less we do, the more we find it. Because sometimes when we search for something, right, most of the times we do more. We think we need more. We want to study more. We want to do. But for this one, it's very much about, releasing, unburdening, quieting, so that we are being more and doing less, you know. And I think also in this particular, so it's not so much about it's not even much about doing more and doing more, being more, doing less, being more, you know. It's about the integration of the two, because as you said, there's lots of doing in that being. there's lots in that silence. So it's not really a dichotomy where to be more you do less. It's just a different way to
Yes.
understand integration, right, of the active and the receptive, of the masculine, feminine, and in the trans is where we truly thrive. It's not in the one or the other, isn't it? So thank you so much. It's a wonderful reflection from you, a teaching really. So we are almost coming to the completion of this episode. So as it is the case, once we get to the completion of the episode is when I feel the conversation is about to start. And I promise, perhaps, I'm not going to promise, but perhaps there will be a second season where there will be more questions. But in light of completing this first episode, let's say together, is there something you would like to share? Is there, in particularly at this time of great awakening of humanity, right? In any awakening, there's an assessment of what is working, what is not longer working, what habits can be kept, what habits should be changed. So a lot of humanity is struggling a bit with that, with change and awakening. Is there something you would like to share, perhaps an encouragement or that would be really lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, on that note, I guess where I'm at personally is probably the easiest thing to share, the most recognizable starting point. And that is that, there's this great common kind of domesticity that's happened in humanity. We've lost our wildness. And, you look at the world and the planet, and there's this talk about rewilding the planet. I actually think we need to rewild ourselves as well. We've been contained. The words came to me in the last couple of days, uncontained. And interestingly, in yoga, there is a real sense of containment in yoga practices. And that's been really essential for me to learn the discernment of what is right, what is good, what is just, pleasure seeking, what is aligning me. Yoga really helped me understand that path. And that brought a lot of integrity, and that brings a lot of integrity to people. And yet within that, we also, for me at this point in time, I need to recognize that within that discernment, I now need to come back to my wilderness. I need to come back to rewilding myself and letting go of the domesticity, because the domesticity tends to breed limitation. It tends to breed judgment and competition, but also the word's gone at the moment, but when you place yourself against someone else rather than actually just in community.
Comparison, perhaps.
Comparison. Thank you. Yes, comparison. And what we need now is community. For the world to thrive, for individuals to thrive, we need community. And if we can rewild community again and kind of pluck it back out of the hands of the governments, we kind of handed everything over and said, all right, you do that. But now we've kind of realized, well, hang on, they're not necessarily grown up and awake enough to understand what needs to be done. We need to awaken ourselves and hold each other's hand and connect and go, right, how do we go forward in a way that's really soulful and helpful? I know I was listening to the radio today and the news came on, and it was like, well, the economy has grown this much and the GDP is at that. And I just thought, really, is that how we're benchmarking the world and reality, is by the economy? What about people? What about the planet? What about the health of the soul and the individual? So right now, for me, it's about how do I express the beauty of humanity, the beauty of this human form, because I came here to do this human thing. So how do I be this in a way that honors it in the beauty of itself, in the way that the magical dance of being this human female form and bringing that to life and sharing that in a way that has joy in it and abundance and kind of liberation, just to celebrate. Just let's get back to celebrating what it is to be human and be together and to be one. let's do being one rather than conceptualize being one or individualize being one. Let's do it together. So I guess, yeah, that's where I'm at, and that's where I'd love humanity to be together as well.
Thank you so much. This is okay. This is a wonderful, yes, I can feel it. I can feel it. I love, 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 love the idea of rewilding. Thank you for bringing that up. It's not something that is talked about often, actually, outside of the environment. However, we are part of the environment. I think that that's really fascinating, that we may be sharing about, as you said, rewilding the environment, but seeing us separate from that process in a way, right? It's so very, very, thank you for that. So let's, that's an invitation I share very much. So really, thank you so much for being here, Niraimathi. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for watching this episode. And please read the full bio of Niraimathi in the description. And also you will find a website link to learn more about Niraimathi's work. So you may connect with her directly. So thank you, Niraimathi. Really appreciate you being here. And we'll see you soon. Okay? Yes. Ciao, ciao.
Loka samasta sukhinu bhavantu sarve janaha sukhinu bhavantu Om Shanti Shanti